We got another one for you. We'll be doing the upgrade of the stereo, the component front sets, and the add an amp and sub. So I'm going to show you how to do that very quickly. This is for any DIY or anyone that's never done it before. So let's get to it. Alright everyone, we are going to start on the radio part. On these model or year S2000, these are pretty easy to take off. Obviously, you can already see it already has an aftermarket radio, but the brackets that hold the aftermarket radio do use the factory brackets. So no matter what, these thing has to come off. If you still have the stock one, obviously it still has to come off because you need that bracket. But all you really need is one of these to just kind of slowly pry it for every corner. Do not try to pull it or do not try to stress it because you can't crack these. But like I said, start off from the corner and then work your way out and slowly start to pry it off. Close it and pretty much shows the radio right there. As I was mentioning, it's held only by 4 screws right here. The factory one is held the same way, so obviously just take those off, pull it out, and we'll go from there. Once you get all the screws out, obviously just pull it out, access all the wires. Yeah, about that. They didn't even use a aftermarket wire harness, so they just kind of splice into it. Obviously not the right way to do it, but some people do it. It is what it is. Go ahead and do it right. Once you get the radio out, you're gonna have to take off those screws to hold it. It's only one each, and make sure you put the right side on the right location. Obviously it'll still have the left and right stamp to it, so go ahead and do that. Alright everyone, we will start off with the radio. Excuse me. He did choose the UTE 73BT. This is a mechless, meaning there's no CD. It's got USB, Bluetooth, and things like that. The wiring harness adapter that you will need is a Metra 1721. This will be a direct plug and play. I need to check if this thing even have rear speakers. I doubt it. If not, you don't have to hook up the rear speakers. So let's get to it. Alright, so for the wiring, it's pretty self-explanatory. If you have a solder, this is pretty old. This is just on my workbench type of solder, so it's nothing fancy. It's got an adjustable heat range. As far as this particular S2000, it's a 2002, so it doesn't have any rear speakers. If I recall, the 2006, I believe, have the tweeters in the back. Also, if you want to add rear speakers on the back, you'd have to run new wires for them. So as you can see here, I taped up the pair that usually goes for the rear. It's the purple and green. I did the same exact thing on the side that plugs into the factory stereo connection. It's pretty much self-explanatory. I didn't close this up yet. I usually put Tessa tape, but the only thing you will need is the grays, the 2 whites, the yellow, the black, and the red, along with the blue. Everything else is pretty much, like I said, tape it up. You don't need any of that. This one's kind of dangling. This is for the remote turn on for the amp, since it's going to be an amp and sub. So I just kind of left that hanging. So once I have everything pretty much ready, I will Tessa tape these, or you can use the electrical tape. If you do not have solder, you can always use butt connectors, the butt connectors with the heat shrink, anything like that. But as far as kind of tearing it off and stripping and things like that. You don't need anything fancy. Just go to AutoZone, get you like one little $7 crimper slash stripper. I have a lot of these. Obviously I'm not in the garage, so I'm not going to use my fancy one. It's not even really required, but this gets the job done. I believe this one's $10, so it'll strip multiple sizes of wire, and you also have like a little crimper. I wouldn't suggest these to crimp butt connectors. It's not really going to do it. You need one of those bigger ones. But other than that, like I said, that's the radio side. We'll go ahead and attach the radio to the bracket and then get that one done. Alright, before we can begin and put the new radio in, we obviously had to take all of these things off, separate the Pioneer harness, and then tape all these back off so it'll look like it was OEM again, and then plug the radio back in. So just a quick video before I put everything back in. I ran the RCA on the side right there. There's pretty big gaps in there, so you can pretty much just slide it in there. The remote wire as well goes to the blue and white. This is the aftermarket radio harness that should have been used from the get-go. My hands I kind of cleaned it a little bit due to the cheap tape that they used. It just kind of disintegrate and get all sticky. But anyway, just kind of wanted to show you real quick before I put everything back in. The reinstallation is just the reverse of the removal of the old unit. So you already seen that on the beginning of the video. We will not be using these universal things. We'll be using the factory one. So this one's kind of doesn't look good anyway, so we'll not be using that. It'll look a lot better with the one that came with the Alpine. So let's get to it. All right, now that we got everything installed, like I said, everything is just the reverse of the removal. As you can see, I used the trim that came with the Alpine. Overall, it looks better, in my opinion, than this thing right here that whoever installed it used. It's obviously curving, and this is one of those universal ones, so they don't look good anyway. But anyways, before you put all these panels on, I would always recommend testing everything before you put everything back. It doesn't take that long to take it off, but rule of thumb, always check before putting everything back together, which I did. And make sure this thing closes. As you can see, no binding, so just check the little things. Doesn't take very long to do. Pretty easy car. So, and then just kind of snug everything back, and then you're pretty much done. So let's go ahead and do the initial startup so you can see.
The main attraction when I enter the turf, when I pull up, people gather around me like an ice cream truck. People always ask me what I wear many hats. I'm something.
Another thing you might encounter, excuse me, if you have one of these big knobs right here, if you push it too hard, it might catch and push it. But if you just go slow, everything works fine. So just kind of keep that in mind if you're buying a new radio. Just push it on and off slowly. Don't go too crazy like you're pushing a big boulder. So, but yeah, that's the only thing that you will encounter. This is a tight fit. You are using the factory bracket, so you are limited on the movement. So everything is all good. Moving right along, we will be doing the components for the front doors. To begin this one, it's actually pretty easy. You'll have a little cover right here. You can use a little pick, just be careful, or you can use one of these panel remover. It'll have a cover up here. This one's already missing, so not gonna worry about that. There's gonna be a Phillips screwdriver right there, and then this little cover right here. This one you can use another flathead, just kind of be careful on it. Once you get that out, we'll go ahead and move to the next process. Oh, by the way, they're all Phillips. Phillips. Little cover. Sorry about that. Before we start popping all the corners of the panel, underneath, you kind of want to put your finger right here. There's going to be like a little notch where you can put your finger, just to give you a little bit more leverage pulling. Some people take this off, but I kind of pop it just to prevent it from breaking. You might want to take that off. It just pops off and slides to the side. Let's see if I can do this one. Yep, there it is. Nothing but covers. Obviously the little locking that goes like this. So you can see I already got everything popped. To get this off, I generally use my panel remover just because this is going to be stiff if it's never been taken off. So once you get all that, just kind of lift up towards up, and that's the whole panel. Unplug the tweeter right there, and then unplug the power window and everything else, the power door locks, or the power windows and the power mirrors. So go ahead and do that, and let's move on to the next step. S2000 come in 6.5, so just go ahead and take off the 3 bolts. You will be making new holes for these, so just kind of be aware of that. You can use the one that comes with your speakers, or you can use a different type of screws, but I can't remember if the Rockford Fosgate come with new screws, which are kind of like these, but some people use the stock one. I mean, you kind of can't use it just because it doesn't have anything to grab on to make new holes, so we'll be using new screws for that, and then we'll go from there. To get the speakers out, there's going to be this little lever. You just kind of, you pinch it on both ends, pinch it in, see how like it releases, and then pull out. Since we are doing a new component, go ahead and take off the tweets. That way we can replace it with the aftermarket one. So just only 2 screws, pretty easy. We're going to be taking off the stock one and gluing on the new one to the same bracket. That way it goes back in like nothing ever happened. So let's get to that. So we go ahead and remove the factory tweeter from the mounting bracket. There will be a screw right here. Now remind you that it'll be a tough one, so use a little impact. Just do a little increments of maybe like intensity of half. That way you're not, because it might fling in and hit your finger. So just kind of give it a little tap of the impact and it'll release. So once you get that out, that's your bracket. You can toss these little tweeters. You won't even need them anymore. For you DIYers, and if this is your first time really working on your car, for the speakers, you can cut them and crimp them and things like that, but if you're not trying to do that, they do sell the plug and play. As you can see, it plugs in and it gives you the positive and negative. The part number for that, let's see if I can open it for you, 72-7800. Yep, that way you can just plug and play it. No cutting, no splicing, or no modifications. So yeah, that's what it looks like. Alright, we'll be unboxing the front component sets. It'll be the R165-S. This is a component set, meaning it has a mid base and a separate tweeter, just like the factory. So, by the way, this will be the amp that will be powering that base tube, or whatever you call those things. But that's the 350.1, and that's the recommended amp for it. So we're using the T-Spec 8-gauge kit. You don't really need anything big for this one. It's not very much wattage or output, so the 8-gauge worked fine. But let's go ahead and open it. As mentioned, like I said, it's gonna come with these separate tweeters. So, and then got the little locks. So 2 tweeters. Extra speaker wires, don't need that. We got plenty of slack already. If you ever want to mount it to a card, kind of like standing up, these are for. Got new screws. Alright, here's the screws that I was talking about. These might be a little bit too long, so I might have to use something shorter if I can find one, but more than likely I will probably use these. So just put that aside for now. You won't need the grill, so just kind of unbox it, test fit it, make sure it fits. Hopefully you don't have to cut anything. We're praying for that. Just trying to do a quick, easy replacement and swap, and hopefully everything works out. So I'll go ahead and test fit this and see if it fits on the factory bracket and show you what that looks like. So I ended up having to take the factory bracket off. I did run into a little issue. It's hitting the magnet just a little bit to my liking. So I'm going to try and remove that circle part. I'll show you what I'm going to be removing. Just to kind of trim this circle, that way the magnet would just sit there, because that's the only thing it's hitting right now. So we'll go ahead and cut that. I don't recommend you kind of forcing it in there. I don't like the way that's sitting. You might stretch the basket, because as you can see it has a little gap, so we can't be having that. So let's go ahead and cut that and show you what that looks like. Alright, I got the back one cut out. As you can see, it's sitting flat now, so there's no gaps in between. So it's not the prettiest cuts, but all you're really doing is clearing that big magnet. It's not very much, but as you can see, that's where it begins. So you don't have to make it pretty. Nobody's really going to see it, but it just gets the job done, and it gets it fitting right compared to forcing it in with the gap in there. So yeah, just put the 4 screws in and put it back in the location. So I got the speaker wires connected together. The tweeter plugs in here. I also connected it the same way. This does have the seal on them once you heat shrink them. So I would recommend these if you're DIY, especially with the water getting in and out of the door itself. So like I said, the tweeter will be plug and play. I got that thing drying right now since I glued it together. I'll show you what that looks like, but for now I'm going to install the speaker back. So that's what it's going to look like, and it's almost done. Alright guys, we just finished the tweeter. As you can see, I just kind of used the ABS glue sticks. These kind of dry pretty hard, so but if you only have glue, you can use glue to hold it to the metal. I just kind of have it on certain spots just to kind of hold it there. That thing will not go anywhere. These things are pretty good. So I would always use one of these if you can, but if you don't have one, like I said, use glue. So like I said, everything looks OEM. Good to go. As I mentioned before, I kind of use the factory plug for the tweeter. You can see, use the same thing, the heat shrink but connector deal. You can solder it, heat shrink it, whichever you like. This one's, to me, I like it better. So if you want to do it this way, I got everything plugged back in for the tweeter, held in there. All the glues are dry. So we'll go ahead and pop the door panel back and then test it out.
uscellular.com. Hit music.
So I got everything put back together. Tweeter in, all the screws are in. The cover, the passenger side will be the same exact thing. So I'm not going to show you the same exact thing, as literally it's the same process, same removal, same speaker installation and tweeter. So, but yeah, everything is tested, everything is working, all is good, and then we'll move on to the passenger side, and then after that, we'll go on with the amp and sub. So yeah, I already got everything tested, rock and roll. All right, since we got everything done, we are moving on to the amp and sub. Since the battery is on this side, we're going to be running the power from here. Positive. We're going to trace everything down to the harness and zip tie it in there. There will look like there's already a couple of things running to the grommet, so we're just going to make the hole a little bit bigger so the power wire will go in. I will show you once everything is kind of ran, just to give you an idea, but like I said, just kind of follow that engine harness piece and it'll shoot through right here, and then zip tie it right here, and then follow down. So just to give an update, as you can see, I got kind of the idea on where the wire would run. It'll be away from anything hot, so as you can see right there, it's going to one of the grommets. Just poke a hole. Just make sure you don't poke the wire, because that'd be a big bad thing to have to replace. So just kind of be careful, move it around, kind of get the feel of it. The harness is not very big, so you can put a slit on the back or on the top of the grommet and you'll be all right. But yeah, that's the general idea. I'm gonna start taking apart the door panel just to kind of give you. This thing is pretty quick to take off. It just pops off last I recall, so let's go ahead and pop that off. So only held by 3 clips. That's probably the easiest thing to come off in this car, but overall, let's go ahead and start running everything. That's the RCA. Mind you, this is not all the way 100% done. Everything's gonna be cleaned up. Everything's gonna be ran the way it's supposed to. So let's go ahead and start doing that. And lift this up because this is where all the wires are gonna run. So once we get all that done, I'll give you an update. So I got the power wire kind of ready. I took the kick panel cover off and the door sill. You might be wondering why it's not taped yet. Mind you, this is just kind of getting an idea where the wires are going to go. The zip ties are temporary there. That way I know how long I need to cut because the amp is going to be underneath the seat. For the ground, you might be wondering where you can put this on the ground. You got one of these frame rails right here. Just make sure you scrape off the paint. That way the ground cable or the terminal would have a sufficient ground signal. If not, you're not going to get that if it's direct to paint. So I used one of these things. You can kind of get an idea on what you can use. You can use a flathead if you don't have any of these, or if you don't have any metal scraper, paint type of thing. You can kind of just use whatever just to scrape off the paint. Now this is not on the outside of the vehicle. You might be wondering what's underneath that. It's kind of a hollow part. As you can see, there's a hole right there. If you put your finger underneath, there's nothing underneath. There's a big gap, so you can screw that terminal in there without any issues. I'm not really sure where other people would do theirs, but that's the safest way for me. That way you're not risking of catching a brake line or a gas line or anything like that. So that's where the ground's going to be. Let's continue on, kind of getting an idea on where the wires will go. Alright guys, we have the ground pretty much installed. Like I said, there's nothing underneath that, so don't worry about the screw. I use a self-tapping screw, bare metal, and it's pretty tight in there, so that ain't going anywhere. So ground is done. Let's proceed. So for this part, there's gonna be a little slit right here where the airbag wire is going through. So you're just gonna have to kind of fish it down from like right here, and then just follow the harness, and it'll come out just where the bracket is. So you don't really even have to do any cutting or anything like that. So but yeah, that's the wire. It's not very far. Here's the bracket, here's the opening. You just kind of have to run it underneath. So yeah, no cutting involved. It's pretty easy. All right, just to kind of show where the amp is placed, it's underneath the seat. I always trying to make these wires kind of have a little slack, that way it's not so tight. It is going to the hole. I'm going to be zip tying together as a final completed install. RCA is on the side. Now a lot of people would go wild asking like, how did you screw that on? It's actually not screwed on the body or in the body. It's only screwed to the carpet. Now you don't need a lot of support on this one. It's not very heavy amp, it's not very big. So just kind of slowly hand screw it to the carpet and it'll hold it just fine, as you can see. That way it's not in the way of the foot and it's not in the way of the seat. When I move it, it doesn't even touch it, it doesn't pull it, it doesn't tug it. So pretty much that's where the amp is. You can place it there if you want, or you can place it in the trunk, whichever one you desire. So we had to change plans on this one. I originally wasn't going to take off the hardtop, but we kind of have to get access to the back. Now it's a lot more open. Now I can kind of plan the execution a little bit more, because I will be putting the sub on this location. So like I said, now it's a lot more easier. Instead of me kind of dicking around and spending my time trying to crawl in this little thing, it's a lot more easier, a lot more quicker. and straightforward. So we'll go ahead and start test fitting the sub, and then hopefully everything works out. So we had to change plans from the previous video. I know you saw that the sub was supposed to be right here, but I kind of mimicked it, and that's going to be a big problem with all that noise. I can't be having that while people are driving, so we're not going to be placing it there. Decided to go ahead and put it in the trunk. This actually fits perfect in this location. I don't know if you can see right there, perfectly set. I did put a little board on the bottom, that way just to kind of support it, since it kept going on the side and is going to a deeper side of the trunk itself. So right now it's sitting flat, so as you can see, that ain't gonna go nowhere. So I think we'll stick to that, as it's a better placement. That way he can still have his oil and things like that on that little cubby hole. So it kind of sucks. I did like the look of it being there, but it is what it is. Sometimes it happens, but you got to work with what you got. So let's go ahead and get everything plugged in. I'm gonna go ahead and screw the box directly to that wood, that way it doesn't move around. So yep, let's go ahead and do that. So I went ahead and got the sub part done. As you can see, that thing is not going anywhere. It's pretty secure in there. I did actually test it, and I've noticed that it does sound a lot better being in here than being over there. Self-explanatory. The trunk will always be a little bit louder compared to an open space. So it was a good move to put it here. He can still utilize all the little space. There's that little wood, so like I said, I'm pushing on it. That ain't going anywhere because it's wedged in, and it's pretty much a good platform to have. So overall, it's pretty good location to put in there. So you can kind of be creative on how you want to mount it, but like I said, I just put a board underneath and then screwed it to the box. That way it doesn't go anywhere, and all his stuff are still utilized. So yeah, if you got any questions, feel free to message me. So we'll just keep continuing and start putting everything back together, and everything is done. So we are finishing everything up. I got everything loomed, secured. I'm just gonna show you. Yeah, make sure you loom it. Some people don't, but I prefer to make it kind of look like it belongs there. Doesn't cost that much. So, but yeah, let's just recap. Did the stereo, did the amp and sub, did the front components, ended up mounting the sub at the trunk. So overall, kind of took a while just because this car is not intended to have all these equipment, but everything was done. So enjoy the video. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, leave a message. If you please subscribe, that'd be awesome. Other than that, that's a wrap.